everybody. Welcome to a very special post from Strong Inside Out. It is my pleasure to welcome Chris Brogan on today. Now, Chris Brogan is the CEO and president of Human Business Works, which is a business design company using publishing and media to provide tools and smarts to help professionals work better, do what they want, and to be brave, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So, Chris, is there anything that you want to say?
I want to say hi, friends of Amy.
Awesome. All right. So I would also like to say that you are doing an excellent job of breaking the stigma that one can't talk about his or her depression. You're very successful, and you're very open about your bouts with depression as well, and just being okay with what they are, which I think is so important, because I feel like a lot of people try to push it away and it just makes it worse, which is a lot of what the 30 by 30 project is about. And I want to, again, thank you for all your support with that, and just kind of bring to light a lot of what you've done already. So you did an excellent YouTube video called Depression is an Offline Event, and how reaching out online is not necessarily the best method when you're going through that darkness, when you're really struggling, and that online won't save you, but instead to take care of yourself offline and then come back online. And I just wanted to see if you had anything further to elaborate on about that.
Well, so it's easy to misunderstand the intention of the post, because sometimes, especially when you're depressed, by the way, where you take everything the wrong way.
Yeah.
I'd be like, nice hat. I hate you.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons that I tell people to take care of it isn't like go away because you're annoying when you're depressed. It's that there's a lot more opportunity for things to go horribly wrong when we're feeling depressed. And so we might be really down, and we've shown up at this online party and said, hey, I feel horrible and I need some nurturing. And they're like, oh, I'm here for the party. I don't want to even talk to you right now. And they're not being mean either. They're just not, on your tune. And it's not their job. They're not your therapist. They're not there to make you feel better. And so you have a lot of opportunities to feel even worse. You have a lot of opportunities to feel like, oh my gosh, nobody loves me. Everybody hates me. I'm going to go eat worms. So get offline and go find the real people in the real world that can help you. And it could be that your family isn't the right ones. They might be the ones making you depressed. Or, let's not use that language. They might be the ones that get you towards that feeling that you end up going depressed. Go, your priest, your whoever. I don't care. It's your therapist if you can afford it, or it's you. You just get on your own thing and you start looking at your scripts. I have a notebook, Amy. I don't have it near me. I have a little notebook where I write the thing that I love to say to myself that's the bad script, and now I've written the new scripts underneath. And so if I'm really down, I just grab that and I just flip it open the page that because unfortunately, and you might know this, when you're depressed, you repeat the hell out of the same old thing. Oh, I'm ugly. Whatever your one is, you'll say it again because it's one you always say. So you might as well have something written for what you should feel like instead that you can write when you're on the up.
That's an excellent way to do it. It's actually a cognitive behavioral therapy method. I don't know if you've gone through any of that before, but that's a lot of what helped me personally when I paired it with fitness, because I was able to rewire those automatic thoughts into my brain and make those more of a default instead of those horrible cycling thoughts. But yes, they do definitely come back. So what I want to ask of you, I guess, is what do you personally do when you start to feel low? What is your way of reaching out?
Well, so again, when I feel low, one of the first things I'll do is I'll tell my girlfriend Jack that, just FYI, I think I'm heading into a depression. And, the only thing I'm doing there is if suddenly you haven't heard from me in a while, I want you to check, how am I doing? And also, it's just sort of it's a good warning to tell one significant other, because then that's not when they bring up the worst possible information, if they're good at being your significant other. You know what I mean? Like if you're feeling horribly down and then the person, I'll say this one teasing thing. So Jack watches news and I don't. The last thing I need to know is what's going on. And so she tells me this horrible story one night right before bedtime. And I was just kind of like, I didn't want that. And there it goes in my head. And of course, I'm going to process that all night. So I just said, do me a favor, never tell me news again. But if you do, warn me you're going to tell me a horrible story. So one of the things I do when I'm down is I alert the authorities, so to speak. This is the story. And that just keeps me a little safer. The second thing I do is I start working on myself as soon as I can. I used to wallow a bit more in it. I used to just kind of, oh, I'm depressed. I know it's here. I could feel it. I'm just going to go get in the bed. I'm going to go under the covers. And then I realized that itself is a script. Like that action, well, of course I should get under the covers. I'm depressed. I should. Well,
Yes.
You're not going to get less depressed in your bed. There's nothing in the bed saying, you know what's going to make you cheery is curling up even though there's sun outside. Mm-hmm. So I worked on that. So the new thing I do is as I feel myself wanting to go for the bed, I get whatever clothes I can dare to put on and get outdoors. I'm never fashionable when I'm never fashionable, period. But I'm the least fashionable when I'm depressed, and I just deal with it. And so that's what I get out of my house. And the reason is because it's easy to hide in your house if you're depressed. We all do.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the other one. And then the third one I tried my hardest to do, the thing that breaks my depression better than anything else is be helpful. If I can be helpful to somebody else, I kind of start to forget my own crap.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of those things right there. I think taking action, hit it. Taking action is going to be just one of the best things that you can do. The worst thing you can do is just sit in one place and let it overwhelm you. So helping is another great one. Putting yourself outside yourself almost and trying to make other people feel better will just be, it can even be a selfish act of helping others. Help others to help yourself. So I'm all about it. Selfish acts of helping. That's horrible. But you actually, the big post that actually really alerted me to you that I actually wrote about before was every time I talk about depression. And it's such a beautiful, poignant piece for me because until then, I had never heard or read anybody that was so open about it and had said it so in such a way that people who don't struggle with depression could understand it. I actually showed it to my fiance because I was like, this explains exactly what I'm going through and how you can't necessarily cure it for me. So if you haven't read it, I'll put a link to it in the post. Chris says depression is not the blues. It's just a chemical imbalance. And sometimes it just happens provoked. Sometimes it's not. It just comes around. And that it's just, you're going to have, you said actually, if you want to elaborate here more on what people come back to you with when you post about like, oh, I'm not feeling so hot right now. What do people say to you?
So let me just see. Let's see. You better, I guess what I've said is that, I'm not asking for you to come and cheer me up. I'm not asking for you to come and add something more to the storyline. I'm really just saying, I'm just letting you know. And one of the reasons I am is because my job is to communicate with people. So I'm making sure that people understand that I might not communicate in the same way all the time. With regards to finding that it's useful to people, I think that one of the things that, like you said, you showed it to your fiance. There's a gender thing here. So what's his face? John Gray, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus said this. Women like to share their opinions and feelings and they want the man to say, I see you and I just heard what you said. Mm-hmm. What men do when they hear that opinion is they go, I can fix this. And it's baseline. It's not your fiance, it's males. Normally, and it's so funny. The rare time I'll get some guy, I'd be like, that's not me. I'm thinking, let me ask your wife if that's you.
Exactly. Yeah. So can you elaborate a little bit about the feedback that you get from people when you are open about your depression, say on Twitter or on Facebook?
It's really, I'm so mostly amazed by this because, for instance, that particular post, every time I talk about depression, which is only 5 or 6 months old at the time we recorded this, has already almost 300 comments on it. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's in the public eye. My typical post might get 30 comments or so. Privately, I get a lot of email. I just ran into a guy at this restaurant. It was the weirdest restaurant. I ran into 2 people I hadn't seen in a long time, and some other guy who I didn't know but knew me, because as he moved something out of the way, he goes, let me get that for you, Chris. And I was like, who are you? And he'd read 2 of my books or whatever. And he had clinical depression. He had post-traumatic stress disorder, actually, from being in the armed services. So he told me, well, thank you so much for the depression information. It's really great. Because of that, I want to share something with you. And he, opened up. So I'm getting a lot of more private conversations, as one might, because they're not quite ready to talk about it. But I'm going to say it's amazing to me, because what that affords is it lets a lot of people who haven't quite opened up yet sort of practice their training wheels with me.
Yes. And I think I can definitely relate to that. I actually called upon people to tell their depression stories on my on one of my blogs, and it just went silent crickets. And I can totally understand that. It might have been a little bit too bold of me to suggest, but a lot of people reached out to me personally and said, this is my story and this is how you can help, which is amazing. People, please keep doing that because it's helping me a lot to help you. But also I think what really stands out to me in that post is that you say you're being brave so that people who are still afraid can start being brave as well. And I can definitely relate to that as well. And though you're feeling down, you're just being okay with not being okay.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a really amazing thing that you're doing for people. So thank you so much for shedding some light on that.
It's just a little part of what you're doing with the whole bigger project on 3030. I mean, I just think that with enough voices, we'll get there. And the kind of folks who might be watching or who are in your crowd maybe already know a bit of this. But, you know, once you get even just a little bit of yourself handled, you could start passing it on. Because, I mean, that's the trick is there's just far too many depressed people still hiding. And, you know, it's not like we have to drag them out into the light. We can just show them where the light is. Yeah,
and that there is light, that light even exists. So definitely. So if we can delve into your history a little bit, let me know if I'm getting a little too personal here.
Couldn't possibly.
All right. So I like that a lot. When did you first start experiencing depression or become conscious that that's what you were experiencing?
You know, that's a good question. When it was first ever, when I was identified as clinically depressed was really just a couple years ago. And I had not been to a shrink before. In fact, my previous experiences with anybody in the mental health field were very negative to make it the nicest thing I can say. But then the more I learned and the more I learned how to help myself, then I guess maybe I helped make it easier for them to be helpful to me. And the guy I went to ended up being, he's a bit of a rock star and, you know, he's a book author and all that kind of thing. And it was a little easier to relate. And he's sort of a no BS kind of a guy, which I liked. He was very much not the, you know, tell me how you're feeling. He was like, get out of bed. And I needed that, I think. I just sort of needed, you know, something a little short of a drill sergeant, but, you know, nicer than my mom. Well, I'm sorry. My mom is really nice, more than my nice mom.
Yes.
Please God, my mom don't watch this. My mom and I have a great relationship. We have the nicest relationship. But, you know, I needed somebody meaner than my mom and nicer than a drill sergeant.
Yes. We got there. So how long did it take for you after you started feeling these really deep feelings to start seeking help, to find that man you just told us about?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I didn't, so let's say I probably first knew I was depressed way back in like high school, but you know, everyone in high school is depressed. I mean, it's so hard to quantify that because it's like, oh, angst, high school, they're a synonym. You know, I had moved from a small town in Maine where everybody was my friend, and I'd only been in that town less than a year. So in my mind, I was like, if none of these people knew me and I was a friend, I must be a pretty smart guy. I get down to this new place in Massachusetts and I have no friends. The one guy who wants to be my friend won't be my friend if anyone else is around. And I was just like, oh, I'm a horrible person. Now I'm the same guy. So of course, this is where you start realizing that you're using the crowd around you as the mirror. So I get suicidal and depressed, and I start, you know, making my first bad attempts at suicide, you know, the fake lame ones that you do, and thank God. And, you know, I start really making some really bad choices. I start doing all these really, you know, not great things, and I don't really get help, you know, from that point. That's, let's say 16 or so, and then 18 when it was really serious. I don't get help until I'm 40, you know, so another whole lifetime away from that time. And in that time, I'm sure I hurt a lot of people and made a lot of bad choices. I mean, when you're really depressed and you haven't really nailed your stuff down, it's not like you can be really helpful to anybody else. I mean, you try, but it's like building a house on really soft sand.
Yeah.
You know, as much as you try to fix something up on the walls, they're still going to bend because you're still on soft sand. You need a great foundation. So that's my deal.
Yeah, definitely. So did you find that, you were afraid to talk about it at all back then, especially because you didn't have that social support behind you where you were?
Oh yeah. And the more any 18-year-old talks about being depressed, the more everyone's just like, You know,
Yeah.
my parents were loving, and of course, but here's what a lot of times people will get from depression. Not my parents, but everybody. What are you depressed about? What do you have to be depressed about?
Yeah.
You're smart. You're pretty. You're whatever. No one ever called me pretty, but
Oh, you're pretty.
oh, thank you. You called me pretty.
You're welcome.
So, I just went into a song in my head. And guys asking for help is 400 times harder because you're not even supposed to have emotions. What are you even talking about? You're just a dude, But
what are you, weak?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I'm not trying to downplay for women, but if a woman says she's depressed, or her friends are at least going to try to nurture. It's just built into it.
Yeah.
But genetically, males, the hunters, are supposed to kill the weak ones so that we can keep the tribe alive.
Yep. I like that. I like that a lot. So what was there a turning point for you when you said, I just need help. I just need to start reaching out for help. I need to start taking action?
So I started about it with some really... one of the things about being your own doctor is it's a fairly stupid idea at first because you're thinking you're your own doctor, you misdiagnose or you treat the branches instead of the roots. Mm-hmm. And so I got into self-help stuff. I got into like Anthony Robbins, and I think he's really brilliant. I'm not downplaying him. From that into Stephen Covey, all these kinds of guys. And I worked really hard on my motivation and my everything else. And that was great. And I was really good at it. What I ended up doing is I built this incredibly great facade. So for 20 plus years, I was like, I'm totally fine because I know all these skills. And I was the most skilled guy in the world at interacting with humans. I mean, that's my bread and butter. What I wasn't was happy. Mm-hmm. And what I wasn't was in check with my emotions. Pema Chodron, who's a very famous author in the Shambhala Buddhism lineage, talks a lot about the fact that we're just so addicted to not being present. And I'm the poster child for that. So when I finally got help, it started with the very classical traditional, the shrink, drugs, and that. And then I've just never been a guy for medicine, so I decided one day to wean myself off. I didn't tell the shrink until a couple months, which, again, not a good plan. And he said, oh, well, smarty, what you maybe should have done was kind of like down-ramp that a little before you just jumped off of it, but okay. And then I'm fine. And so I did a few other things. So a lot of practice of Buddhism, a lot of working on the root causes, a really great book, The Power of Resilience by Dr. Robert Brooks, and some other nice guy, Sam Goldstein. I know Dr.
That guy
Brooks.
loves you now. He loves you now.
I know. Sam and I are not BFFs, but Dr. Brooks is a friend because his son, Handsome Rich Brooks, runs conferences up this way. We hang. So anyway, I did all the work and I did a lot of the hard work and I did all the stuff that we're not willing to do, and that got me there. But it is so. Tons of people need medicine. That's still not a bad thing. Tons of people need way longer therapy than I did. That's not a bad thing. I just picked my own route. Though I was technically severely clinically depressed, according to the label, it's not like I went off the meds and decided to cut or do any of the other things people do when they're down. I mean, I just found my way to do it in a way that I found a way to retreat, regroup, and then rebuild, and then come back stronger.
And I think that's really key too. And just finding something that works for you, because no one person's method is going to work for everybody. So as much as we can say, do this and do that, do A and do B, A and B might not lead to C for you. So find someone who understands you, start talking, start getting it out, and start recognize that within yourself. So I guess I would just love to wrap up this interview with one more question for you. There are a whole lot of people out there who's struggling, especially who read Strong Inside Out and who are hearing about the 30 by 30 project. And to all those people who are struggling out there, what words of advice would you give them right now?
I'll give you the one thing that was the hardest thing for me to work on, and it was the best thing for me to get done, which was untangling. I use the phrase untangle to mean, and it's sort of a Buddhist thing that I learned, but again, I practice a very secular kind of Buddhism. You could be Christian or Jewish or anything you want to be. You could be Muslim. This is the secular side. It's just the tools, not the who cares if you get reincarnated. You have to let go of your addiction to praise and criticism. There are people, and you have to let go to all of the things that happened in the past that made your life horrible. And that's the hardest one because some people have horrible. They were raped 1,000 times by people. There's just insanely bad stories out there. Yeah. But you have to let them go, because what really happens is you're never going to fix the past. You have to, and you have to. It's not forgive it. You have to accept it. You have to say that happened, and I'm a superhero, and that's ridiculously hard. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh, you just lost me, Brogan. I know, and I don't know what you've gone through. I just know that it's harder than I say it is. But if you can learn to untangle from that, if you can learn to not need your parents' praise, but just love them, no matter if they praise you or criticize you, if you can learn not to need anybody outside of you's praise or criticism, and you can start by loving you, but that's so damned hard. So
yes, yeah.
I'm just going to give you that one piece. Just do that, and the universe changes.
Yeah. Yes, I love that. I think that's perfect. A perfect note to end on. So I just want to thank you again, Chris, for being here and for, again, really supporting the 30 by 30 project. And I think you've really helped a lot of people on Strong Inside Out today. So thank you so much.
Well, you're very kind, and thank you, Amy.